I'll open with a story of what happened in Dublin, Ireland. The teacher said to little Patty O'Toole one day, Patrick, who knocked down the walls of Jericho? And Patty said, well, I didn't do it. So the teacher was scratching her head, and she bumped into Patty's mother the next day and said, I don't understand what's happening at all. I said to Patty yesterday, who knocked down the walls of Jericho? And all he could say was that I didn't do it. The mother said, now look, if my son said he didn't do it, he didn't do it. So finally the teacher was really confused, and she went to Patty O'Toole's house, and she knocked on the door and found Mr. O'Toole on the couch looking for work. And she said, could you tell me, Mr. O'Toole, what's going on here? I asked Patty in school the other day, who knocked down the walls of Jericho? All he said was, I didn't do it. I talked to your wife just an hour ago, and she said if my son said he didn't do it, he didn't do it. What's going on? The father said, look, I don't want any trouble. How much did this wall cost? All right, so this is clearly a case where someone might have been going to Catholic school, but somehow the Catholic education never made its way in. And this is going to be, it says it's a workshop, but it's going to actually be somewhat of a formal presentation. It's going to be a little shorter, and I will open the floor to questions afterwards for a time, and then we can move on and close the conference. But it's about education, Catholic education, and homeschooling. And as I said, it's not going to be what you might think it is. I'm not going to be giving a list of homeschooling programs that I would recommend. I'm only going to recommend one, and that's at the end, and I'll explain why. But what we want to look at is, really, what is education in the first place? Everyone talks about education. Hillary Clinton talks about education. All these people talk about education. What is education? Does anybody here want to stand up and give me a definition? You're brave enough?
He needs to come out of so that you try to draw people to think and come to the truth.
Try to draw people to think and come to the truth. Yes?
Acquiring knowledge.
Acquiring knowledge. Okay, that's part of it. Anybody else?
Beyond the basics like reading, writing, and arithmetic, it's to learn the truth.
To learn the truth. Okay. Well, I'll give you St. Thomas Aquinas' definition. St. Thomas Aquinas' definition of education is the making of the new man up to the point of virtue. That's a profound definition of education that shifts us away from everything that we think. The making of the new man up to the point of virtue. And it's also to make a man who has a full, complete understanding of life and the world around him, an organic whole, rather than a piece, specialty learning. What we have now is people who are insanely great at being a computer programmer, or being an iPhone techie, or being a car mechanic, but they don't know culture, they don't know goodness, they don't know anything else beyond what that little sliver that they're trained to do. Now, I'm all for specialty, people being specialists, but we've lost an organic and whole understanding of what life is, what truth is, by means of this modern education where everything is fragmented, where the average individual turns out to be that wonderful line from Evelyn Waugh in Brideshead Revisited. We find people who are a small part of a man pretending to be the whole. A small part, that's how he describes Rex Mottram, if anybody knows the story. A wonderful character, Rex Mottram, beyond pathetic, it's wonderful. So, I'm going to talk about true education according to the mind of St. Thomas Aquinas, and I'm going to be relying on one of the most brilliant Thomists of the 20th century, who's virtually unknown to even many modern philosophers. And that is a priest named Father Austin Woodbury, who lived from 1899 to 1979, one of the most brilliant Thomists of the 20th century. He lived and taught in Australia, and he was a student of the eminent French Thomist, Father Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange, arguably one of the greatest Thomists of the 20th century. As I said, he's not as well known as he should be, and I know of him because I had the good fortune of studying Thomistic philosophy with the late Dr. Raphael Waters, who studied with Father Woodbury for 20 years. And when Dr. Waters died in 2010, I was privileged to receive his most important papers, and one of them was an unpublished manuscript by Father Woodbury it was called The Hierarchy of Values in Education, and I'm going to be giving you a brief summary of this treatise. Now, the entire treatise is basically a defense of St. Thomas Aquinas' definition of education, and that is, as I said earlier, the making of the new man up to the point of virtue. Now, a point has to be made from the very beginning that this is a philosophical defense. In other words, it is a defense and an explanation whose arguments are based on reason, not revelation. Now, Father Woodbury does not argue here from Scripture, from sacred teaching, from papal encyclicals. He does not argue from authority, but from reason. Anyone who studied philosophy will know an argument from authority is the weakest argument. You have to defend your reasoning, every step in your chain of logic, and it has to all cling together. Okay. Now, I've read a number of Woodbury's things. He was a remarkable genius, and he was more than capable, believe me, of arguing from theology. But what we're doing today is his philosophical defense. And I'll have to beg your indulgence because Father Woodbury's thorough treatment goes on for 22 pages, and I'm going to condense it for you, hopefully within the space of about 28 minutes. But I want to give you an outline of where we are, what we're going to cover, so you know. And this is also, for those not used to Thomistic philosophy, this is very much a Thomistic structure. So some of it might sound strange, but the structure I'm giving you is, and what Father Woodbury gave you, is really the structure, is the patrimony of the Church, the patrimony of our philosophical tradition of realism according to the Aristotelian Thomistic system. So there's basically 8 points, right? Yeah, 8 points. First, principles of reason. Second, what is human nature? Third, the 3 powers of human nature. Fourth, what is education? Fifth, the hierarchy of values to be observed in education. Sixth, physical education and related matters. 7, religion in education. And finally, number 8, the development of power. Development of power. I'm starting to talk like Hillary. The development of character. Okay, character. Which I'm not talking about Hillary when it comes to character. Now, the first thing to note about Father Woodbury's approach is that it argues, as I said, from principles of reason. And principles of reason are so fundamental that they cannot be proven. They can only be defended. And you defend them by demonstrating that to deny any one of the principles leads to absurdity. And for starters, of course, the most fundamental principle of reason is the principle of non-contradiction, that a thing cannot be and not be at the same time and under the same respect. Now, a 4-year-old can understand this. You have a 4-year-old named Billy, and you say, Billy, there is chocolate ice cream in the freezer, and also, Billy, there is no chocolate ice cream in the freezer. Okay, now he doesn't have to say, Father, do you realize that you're contrary to the principle of non-contradiction? He just says, huh? What? He knows, okay, these are self-evident. And to claim that the chocolate ice cream is there and is not there is to enter into the world of absurdity. Okay, so this is how principles of reason work. Dr. Waters was a master of the principles of reason. Another principle of reason, every agent acts for the sake of an end. Why did you break the window, Johnny? Oh, no reason. No, there's always a reason. Every agent acts for the sake of an end. Another principle of reason, whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. And both Dr. Waters and Dr. Woodbury taught that the philosopher is the guardian of the principles of reason, and the principles of reason are the tools of the philosopher. So, true to form, Father Woodbury, as philosopher, starts his examination of education with principles of reason. In this case, he opens by explaining that the hierarchy of values of education is governed by what's called the principle of finality. What is the principle of finality? That every agent acts for the sake of an end. And he says there are three important corollaries that flow from this. The first one, those things which are unto an end, made for an end, are not good except in relation to that end. What does that mean? Well, an example, okay? A carburetor is only good, I'm dating myself, carburetors, okay? But a carburetor in a car is only good when it's used for the purpose for which it was made. A carburetor is useless as a can opener, as a pencil sharpener, as a lawnmower. It's only good for that which it was made. Secondly, the imperfect is for the sake of the perfect. That's another principle, corollary. And third, the part is for the sake of the whole. Again, the carburetor is made for the sake of the engine, and the carburetor is well made so the engine may be a good engine. And Father Woodbury goes on to examine human nature itself, because here's the thing, if we want to study education, we have to start by studying what is man. This is the problem that we have in, again, modern learning. Everything is fragmented. They study education without really studying what man is. So how can they know what education is? So Father Woodbury is structured, Thomistic. Here he goes. Father Woodbury spotlights the unity of the human nature. Man may be a composite of body and soul, but he is one substance. He is one nature. We're not just an accidental throw together of body and soul. We're not just a ghost in the machine. Okay? This, of course, is the doctrine of Aristotle, who lived 400 years before Christ, and of St. Thomas. Okay? Body and soul, we form one substance. And it's interesting to note, and this is not in Father Woodbury's text, but that the Atheist Humanistic Manifesto of 1933, which is really pretty much the thought process, the very air we breathe. If you want to understand the modern world without talking about so-called conspiracy theories, just read the Humanist Manifesto. We're there. And it is the Humanist Manifesto 1933 on which modern American education is based. And the Humanist Manifesto 33 flatly denies the proper understanding of human nature. Humanist Manifesto 1 says, quote, holding an organic view of life, humanists find that the traditional dualism of mind and body must be rejected, close quote. Now, this is typical of the new barbarian, as Hilaire Belloc says. The new barbarian cannot build, he can only tear down. He can only destroy. Humanist Manifesto never tells us really what human nature is, what man is. They just say what they reject. And of course, many of you know this, the father of progressive education, the father of American education in the 20th century is, hand on your heart, John Dewey. And John Dewey was one of the original signers of the 1933 Humanist Manifesto, the man regarded as the educational guru of the United States, so much so that our post office recently issued a commemorative postage stamp in his honor. Again, one of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto. So, that as a signatory of that Humanist Manifesto, Dewey starts with a false understanding about the nature of man. So thus, Dewey's educational principles can only lead to confusion and ruin. Again, Aquinas and I think Aristotle, a small error in the beginning ends up to be a big error at the end. Well, this is a big error in the beginning that's going to end up to be a colossal error in the end. So what is the truth about man? As you know, the human soul is an incomplete substance, and the material principle that completes it, our bodies, is also incomplete. Both are substantial principles which by their union constitute one complete nature, one complete substance, man. We go back to the Baltimore Catechism. What is man? A man is made in the image of likeness of God, composed of body and soul. composed of body and soul. That means when we die and our soul is separated from us, we are incomplete. We are in a state of imperfection, and that's why we get our bodies back at the time of the general resurrection. We have to come to be that one being again. Now, Father Woodbury, of course, well, the interesting thing, when you really read Father Woodbury, he meticulously proves every little thing he says. It can be exhausting at times reading him, but it's magnificent. But I'll take you through this a little bit. He demonstrates that we are both material and spiritual, intellectual. By what? By the method of St. Thomas Aquinas, which is what we just look at ourselves. We just, like Aquinas, most of the in philosophy, he's just looking at the world around us and being realistic about what he sees. Same thing with us, okay? We know that we have a material principle. We know we have an intellectual principle. We have the material principle because we are aware by our experience of sensation. We see and feel our bodies. We're conscious of the bodily activities we perform. We burn ourselves on a match. We know it. We walk through our house with bare feet and get that teeny little splinter, okay? And then we start limping, okay? We know it. So we're aware of our materiality. Don't have to go so far proving that. But we also know of our spiritual nature because we are aware of the intellectual powers within us that surpass the powers and limitations of the material universe. We know principles. We know universals. We can know principles of non-contradiction, which is immaterial. Somebody draw me a picture of the principle of non-contradiction. You can't. It's an immaterial principle, okay? We can reflect on our knowledge. We can know universals, such as mankind, or triangularity, okay? Someone draw me a picture of triangularity. You won't, because the concept is universal, but you can only draw one triangle, okay? We have the ability to understand universals. We can know and love immaterial good, such as justice, courage, patriotism, okay? When was the last time you stubbed your toe on patriotism? When was the last time, how heavy is courage? Or what does justice smell like? Okay, these are beyond the senses. These are immaterial concepts. Now, we can grasp them because we are immaterial into the operation of the intellect. An animal has no concept of these things. I know a lot of people, my doggy's smart. No, they have no intelligence. They have none. Well, we could talk about this later if you want, but if you want, remind me during the question and answer how I saved a horse's life by this one time. There's a horse that's alive right now because of me, but we'll tell that later. Very funny story. Anyway, but we can know and love these immaterial goods because the grasp of immaterial concepts requires an intellect to comprehend them. Try to talk about a justice to a stone or even to a dog. They're not going to know anything, okay? So these are spiritual activities of man that demonstrate that man himself has an abiding spiritual principle of activity, which we call the immaterial soul. Now, Father Woodbury thus teaches that there is only one philosophy which provides a reason and a foundation and an explanation of education, and that is the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas. Because he says educatability supposes spirituality. That is an immaterial intellectual life, which in the beginning, I'm quoting now, Woodbury, is a kind of a clean slate as regards to knowledge and habits, and thus must derive its knowledge from sense experience. It is dependent upon the material world for its knowledge, advancing to fuller development by a laborious process such as what we know education to be. So this conception, the human soul and the unity of human nature, is the conception of St. Thomas Aquinas. As Thomistic Professor Edward Fazer points out, he says Aristotelian Thomism is a detailed exposition of what we all know instinctively. That's why the Aristotelian Thomism is really called, it's only one that is bold enough that can call itself the philosophy of realism. It's what is real. Now, we're still talking about what man is, and we're going to talk about his three powers. We all should have got this in Catholic school, by the way. I didn't get any of it. I got, what does love mean to you? What does neighbor mean to you? This is the type of slush that I got. But anyway, this is part of our Catholic patrimony that we've been denied. So, 3 powers, and it's 3 things we have in common with other beings, but there is a hierarchy here, okay? So, starting with man, okay? What does man have in common with the plant world? What do I have in common with my bush? Anybody want to take a stab? We're alive, okay, but beyond that, okay, what we have vegetative powers, which is called nutrition, growth, and generation. Okay, we have to nourish ourselves, and this is imminent activity. We grow, we really don't have much choice about that. This is imminent activity. And generation, we reproduce ourselves. Okay, I've got that in common with my azalea plant. Okay, that's why it's called the vegetative powers. Next, what do we have in common with the animal world? Well, we have what's called sensate life. That is, we have 5 external senses. We hear, we see, we touch, we have the sense of smell, and we taste, and so does my dog. Well, I don't have a dog, but anyway. And we have what's called the 4 internal senses. Imagination, well, we have the common sense, imagination, estimative sense, that's knowing the things are pleasing or harmful here and now, and sensitive memory is the 4th, where we know things as pleasing as harmful in the past. Animals have this. They have imagination. They have sensitive memory. They have estimative sense. That's why they're trainable. It's not because they have intellect. In fact, they have better memories and better imaginations than we do, because it's all they've got. We can talk about that more later. Finally, man has the highest faculty, which is the spiritual powers, and these are his intellect and his will. And this is what we have in common, dare I say it, with the angels, though the angelic intellect is far above man, because we have to reason. We have to go through this process of reasoning to get to the truth, and we might make a mistake. The angel doesn't have to reason. But we can think, we reason, we make judgments, and we can reflect on our own thinking, and we can choose freely. Now, of course, there is a hierarchy of these powers. We go back to the principle that Father Woodbury gave us in the beginning. The lower is for the sake of the higher. The vegetative power is lower, subservient to the sensate power, the 5 external senses, the 4 internal senses. And the sensate powers are subservient to the intellectual powers. Now remember the principle we started with, that every agent acts for the sake of an end. Thus everything in creation has an end, a purpose. This whole structure that I just described that makes up human nature, it has an end, a purpose, because everything has a purpose. A saw is for the sake of cutting wood. That's the end, the purpose of the saw. A pencil is for the sake of writing. An eye, purpose of the eye is for the sake of seeing. It's its end. So then, what is the end of man? What's the purpose of man? What's his final end? Not man, as Woodbury says, as an accountant, or man as a computer programmer, or man as an architect, but man as man, what every one of us have in common as our final end, just in virtue of us being man. And Father Woodbury teaches the end of man as man is perfect happiness. That's what we want. For man is necessitated by the whole weight of his nature to act for happiness. We all want to be happy. Easy to demonstrate. Show of hands. How many people want to be unhappy? Nobody wants to be unhappy. And we all seek happiness, even when we go after something that is objectively evil. We go after it because at the time it's the appearance of good. We seek true goods or apparent good. Even someone who commits suicide, most of the time they do it because they think they'd be better off dead. They're seeking a perverse good, but they're still seeking what they seem to be a good. So man seeks perfect good, and he recoils from imperfect good. What do you do when you bite into an apple, and as you sink your teeth in it, you find that half of it is rotten? You spit it out. We don't want imperfect goods. We want perfect goods. And because man is spiritual, and he has an intellectual life, he seeks perfect, unlimited good, which is not to be found in life on earth. Because what can you think of that will yield you perfect happiness on earth that will completely satisfy every natural yearning and desire. And Father Woodbury explains, teaching himself on Aquinas. I'm just going to quote from him directly. There is in man an appetite for universal or unlimited good. That good alone can perfectly satisfy man, which is unlimited, infinite, and without any admixture of evil. Since man's will is an appetite for universal and unlimited good, only by the possession of unlimited good is the craving of man's will set at rest. Okay, you know where we're going with this. God alone is infinite good, and he uses the term, in quotes, God-possessed, is the only universal good, the only good in which there is no admixture of evil. So it follows that man's perfect happiness consists in what he calls God-possessed, and his perfect happiness can consist in nothing else. So consequently then, the end of man, as man, is God-possessed. Anything that leads us towards this is good. That which leads us away from this is evil. And as this is the end of man as man, then we're always going back to this hierarchy of order here, then all of man's powers, his vegetative life, his sensitive life, his intellectual life, are for the sake of ultimately possessing God. Since the parts are for the sake of the whole, we're coming back to that principle of reason, the three powers are to work according to the proper hierarchy and in union as a kind of regiment. Everything worked together in lockstep, obedience and uniformity. Work together in union as a kind of a regiment for achieving our final goal. Now, this is going to become clearer when we come to the particulars of education. So then, next section, what then is education? Following St. Thomas, Father Woodbury defines education as, now, it's pretty much going to be the same definition as I gave earlier, a little different. The progressive and harmonic development of the power of the child by which he is transformed into a perfect man. Okay, wouldn't you love to hear the NEA try to explain things like that? Okay, no. The progressive and harmonic development of the power of the child by which he is transformed into a perfect man. Now, what's he mean by progressive? He doesn't mean progressive in the sense of John Dewey is a progressive educator or anything like that. He means progressive in the sense that it has to be incremental. Anyone who's taught children know you have to start with this, then you move to that, then you build this up, and then you move this out, and then you drop down again and start over again. But it has to be progressive, okay? And it must be adapted to its subject, which is the child. It also must be, he says, harmonic, because it must be a development of the child's power in due proportion, the lower being always subservient to the higher, and also in teaching young children, we all know the Aristotelian principle, whatever is received in the manner of the recipient. Okay, you have to teach the child as a child. So then, what is perfect man? A perfect man is one who possesses that goodness which man is destined by his nature to possess. So in one sense, a perfect man is one who will fulfill his duties, all of his duties to God, duties to his family, duties to other individuals, duties to civil society, and of course, duties to the church. These are the duties of both justice and charity. So this then is the end of education, the making of the perfect man who fulfills his duties. And since, quoting again, those things which are unto an end are not good save in relation to that end, this gives the ultimate criterion by which we may judge whether an education is good or bad. And this yields the supreme rule, the sovereign law, which must govern education. So people think a good education is just becoming insanely great at chemistry or anything like that, as we're going to see. This is part of it, but it's incomplete. It's incomplete. And sometimes if this quest for chemistry or music or anything becomes more important than our duties to God, then this is a perversion of education. So, and I'm going to get into that here with Father Woodbury. The next section, the hierarchy to be observed in education. And the hierarchy is, he says, since the supreme value in education is its aptitude and its tendency to produce perfect men, then all other values must be subordinate. And Woodbury says, an education is bad if it produces clever writers, brilliant engineers, shrewd financiers, astute politicians, splendid athletes, but not good men. The supreme value in education is his goodness as man, and not his goodness as a grammarian, a writer, a politician. These are subordinate values in man. They are goods, but as we have seen against the principle of reason, the lower must be subordinate to the higher, the less perfect subordinate to the more perfect, and all other values in education must be then submitted to its destination to produce perfect men. And that's why I mentioned, too, homeschooling in this. Homeschoolers have to have this very much in the forefront of their minds when they are deciding curriculum to teach their children. They have to be observing this hierarchy that really, why are we educating our children? To produce men and women who are growing in virtue, to the point of virtue. Father Woodbury also recalls the truth that man is of one substance producing a hierarchy of powers, vegetative life, sensitive life, intellective life. He's going to say, applying the principle that the lower is always for the sake of the higher, we are constrained to conclude that the lower powers of man must be so educated so as to subserve the good of his higher powers and to conduce to the supreme end which belongs to man by reason of these higher powers. So then he makes concrete applications to various aspects of education that we see all the time. Physical education, he's going to talk about, sex education, co-education establishment of boys and girls, and most important, what we're going to cover quickly, the development of character. So first, sports. Now, of course, Father Woodbury, operating on the level of principle, he doesn't recommend any sport in particular, but he attributes great value to physical education, athletes and sports, what he calls the lower elements of education. Now, he basically, it's very interesting, he gives 4 points in its favor and 4 points of caution. The 4 points in its favor, maybe 3 points of caution. No, 4, okay. First, he says the physical well-being of man is normally of great value to his intellectual and moral life. Likewise, great good to the civil community is produced by means of the physical, mental, and moral health of its citizens. It's much better for society to have healthy, robust citizens, and this is also often brought about by most people by engaging in some sort of sport, some sort of exercise and activity that helps to make you healthy. Okay? Second, it helps with the formation of character for the development of a spirit of fair play, a generous spirit, the ability to accept defeat without a spirit of vindictiveness, and the willingness to compliment a superior opponent. My dear 13-year-old son, Benedict, is on a Charlie Brown baseball team right now. They have an even record. They have not won one game. They have lost every day game, and thank God my son Benedict is just, oh, well, there we are. Did you comes home, how was the game? What do you think? That's what I get. So, but he does have a spirit of fair play, or he doesn't want to go kicking dirt into the eyes of his opponents. Number 3, sport and athletes provide, I love this, sport and athletes provide, Woodbury says, an innocent and harmless outlet for the animal energies of youth. We all know it, especially the boys. Bishop Williamson used to say, boys need to slam and be slammed. The boys need that physical activity, the animal energies of youth, okay? And 4, these activities innocently occupy the leisure hours of the young and help to prevent idleness. Very important. But then he voices 4 cautions regarding sport, that we don't make sport a be-all and end-all. First, he says, sport and physical education should not be pushed to such a length that they would interfere with the mental and moral education of the young. Second, it should not be the cause of the young people to neglect the higher things for its sake. Okay, remember the lower is always for the sake of the higher. Third, This is interesting. An overindulging of sport can lead to a serious weakness of character, consisting in this: that one is capable of serious effort only in such pursuits that bring pleasure, with scarcely any power at all of a sustained effort of self-denial for those things that are good for their own sake, apart from pleasure or utility. And Woodbury calls this the danger of practical hedonism. One of the things about sports is it gives immediate reward, as it were. And of course, we know that the good things in life, they take a long time, a long perseverance to achieve. And fourth, he says, sport can never take the place of mind, nor of moral strength, nor morality, nor of religion. Again, if it does, we're into practical hedonism. Now, he moves on to so-called sex education. Very interesting, too. What I didn't tell you about this treatise is this was written about 1956, 55. This goes back, and he's dealing with this problem of sex education that's making its way into the classrooms. Now, we're again reiterate the main principle: the lower is for the sake of the higher, and the supreme value of education is its destination to produce good men and good women. And so-called sex education imparted to school children must therefore be condemned. He said, for such instruction not only fails to subserve the end of education, but greatly impedes it. You're just introducing obstacles to young men, young women becoming good men and good young women. Such instruction inflames the lower passions of youth at a time when they should receive instruction and assistance in bringing their passions under the control of reason. Very simple principle, and we all know it when we're dieting. The sense object stimulates the sense appetite. If we're trying to diet, we don't put pictures of vanilla fudge sundaes and pizza and lasagna or whatever your favorite food is all over your kitchen. You don't want that because the sense object stimulates the sense appetite. This is what happens with sex education and the way it's taught. And it's done for that reason, too, to corrupt the youth. And he says, such information should be taught by parents, one-on-one, father instructing the boy, mother instructing the daughter, and only when the parent deems it's necessary. There's nothing carved in stone that says when the boy is 11 or the girl's 13, you have to sit down and talk to them. You know, a good parent who is attentive to the children, they know when they're ready to hear this, especially if they come home with questions from the little girl next door. All right. So, moral instruction on this matter, of course, must first come from the priest, because as the church is the guardian and the teacher of the moral law. So I don't think we have to belabor that too much. I think everybody really accepts the sanity of that. Now, here's something interesting: co-education. Now, he's not really talking about grade schools. I went to a co-ed school, up into 8th grade. I think they should have stopped it at 6th grade, actually, but up to 8th grade. But he says, Father Woodbury urges that co-education, boys and girls, say together from the ages of 12 to 17, this should be discouraged. These are the critical years in the youngster's formation, and it is, he writes, quote, most often during this period that the child's character is definitely oriented toward what is clean, upright, and honorable, or towards the contrary. Okay? That is, I think we all know that from our friends in high school. It is during these years that they will kind of be fixed in one direction or another, particularly if they don't bring their lower passions under control. Youngsters of this age, he says, have vivid imaginations, but they don't have the good habits, the virtues, fixed in virtue, to give them adequate control over their imaginations, and that their inclinations may follow the imaginations. Here's what Woodbury says. This is a brilliant quote. He says, the victory of reason over our animal elements in man is slowly won and by an arduous fight. Who would jeopardize so capital a victory by forcing the issue when reason is at its weakest and its enemies are at their strongest? The best argument is co-education, I've heard, and of course, again, sex education as well. And of course, social interaction is best achieved at home, in family circles, and in legitimate activities. Of course, now we're going to talk about religion in education. We keep moving up the ladder here. Now, the end of education, he says, is the production of good men and women. The necessity of religion and education is due to this capital truth that a good man is necessarily a religious man. If a man is not religious, he might have some natural virtue, but you really can't say he is a good man because he's incomplete. Proof is that since man is for the sake of an end, which is happiness, that is God-possessed, then man is only good insofar as he tends to the attainment of that end, but he cannot attain to that end except by means of religion. Without religion, he says, man cannot be good as man. At most, he can be good as an engineer, or as a carpenter, or as a soldier, or some other category, but cannot be good as man. So to perfect himself, he has to practice virtue, observe natural law and divine law, practice the 3 theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity, the 4 cardinal virtues, prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, and obtain the means of sanctification to save his soul and to achieve his final end. And he says that though religion, now he says religion must dominate education, but it doesn't mean that every course has to have the religious element, but it has to be under that hierarchy of order. And the child should be taught religious truth, formed to Christian morals, and nothing should be fostered in education that would impede the child's progress towards God, who is his final end. Okay? Well, modern education, of course, has blown that to the wind. It does the opposite. And Dr. Woodbury, again, shows, this is 1956, he shows that he is not a modern ecumenist. He clarifies. Now, in so speaking, I am supposing that the religious truth to be taught in Catholic doctrine, the religious truth to be taught is Catholic doctrine and not heresy. There is no contradiction in God's revelation. And the only religious doctrine that one has the right to teach is Catholic doctrine. Doctrines opposed to this are false, and what is false, no one has the right to teach. Okay, he's got his thinking straight here. Now, we get into the final details of Father Woodbury, and that is the development of character. Remember, he's saying that education, Aquinas is the development of the new man up to the point of virtue. And he's going to get into the development of character. I'm going to cover these points quickly. He goes on at length, but I want to bring this to a close. I know everybody's tired. He points out the temperaments, okay, the 4 temperaments, the sanguine, the choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. And he says that these temperaments, if we can use the terms, are what we're born with, okay? I'm born this way. Well, we can say that with our temperaments. It is the mud. It's the mud of what we are. But we cannot allow the excesses of those temperaments to govern us so that we just blow ourselves off and say, well, of course I get angry and snap people's head off because I'm a choleric. I can't help it. Well, no, that's no excuse. Okay, the temperaments are the mud. But character, he says, is the stamp in the mud. It's what forms our temperament. It is the formation of good habits wherein right reason governs our human nature. And education in the formation of character helps us to become masters of our temperament so that we can practice self-government in a rational manner. So, natural means, he's going to give natural means and supernatural means of developing good character, and then that'll be it. Okay, number 1, the natural means development of health and body. Now, we already touched upon this, the fact that he sees sport and healthy conditions of body as important. It's not that people who are sickly are not of good character, but good health really helps us to have the strength to live a good life and the strength to practice virtue. Okay. Second, and this is important, especially with young runs in development of character, the control of moods. Now, I know adults who never got this training. Believe me, we all do. I'm sure everybody has a picture that came into their mind, or at least one person. But it's crucial for the strengthening of character. Moods such as despondency, melancholy, and elation can sway judgment away from right reason, so control of mood is essential. And we also know that every child is different. Some people are very even, some children, very even-tempered. Some of them you're really thinking, you know, what am I going to deal with today? Okay. Number 3, refinement of sensibility by arts and polite social discourse. We are social creatures. We can't help it. What is the most severe punishments that can be inflicted on a man for a crime? Solitary confinement. We go crazy. We go crazy. I remember one priest said, if you put 4 boys on a desert island and they can see each other, within 15 minutes they will come together. Within 5 minutes, one will emerge as a leader. Okay, it's human nature. We are social, and also there is a kind of governance that's built into our nature. Okay, I'm not talking about that governance now, but we're social creatures. We live in society, and the refinement of sensibilities by arts and polite discourse helps us to become attuned to the needs of others. It leads to the exclusion of coarseness, diminishes egoism. Aristotle said, "He who does not associate with others is either a beast or a god." Now, I've met some beasts, and I've met some people who think they're gods, okay? Neither are they very pleasant to be around. This is really interesting, especially for our time, when everything is in high speed. And this is part of the development of character. The avoidance of constant rush and dissipation. Rush and dissipation of activities impedes development of right reason, right judgment. It causes an insufficient reflection of deliberation, and thus can impede the firm rectitude of the will. So for this reason, I'm quoting Woodbury now, the ancient writers upon the ascetical life demanded a certain degree of solitude for the right development of character and good moral habits. We have to withdraw from the world. We have to withdraw from the world and collect our senses, okay? Of all people. You know who had this happen to him by force and was happy about it? That radical creep, Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky ended up in jail in 1948 and 1949. He couldn't be organizing unions. He couldn't do anything. He had nothing to do but to sit and think. He said it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to him. Because even though he was using this for evil, he came to understand that this time of solitude is a time to think and time to restructure, to structure myself according to the understanding of my end. Okay, now I think and I'm guilty of this too, the number one source of dissipation today is the internet. It is the internet. Facebook, internet, constant texting. Years ago, you would say to your child, in punishment, go to your room. Okay, those days are done. You have to say, go to your room, but give me your device first. That'll punish them. Because most young people's bedroom is, at midnight, Saturday, is communication central. And it's all this dissipation, selfies, a lot of goofiness. Okay, I'm a little goofy on the web with my children sometimes, and that's okay. But Facebook, chat lines, they will destroy quiet, solitude, and you will never really have any time for yourself. Garrigou-Lagrange says, we are always in conversation. If we're not in conversation with others, we are in conversation with ourselves, and we have to direct this conversation to God, okay? We're not even in conversation with ourselves anymore. Another problem, of course, with the internet is what? It encourages curiositas and not studiositas. We go to the websites, we flit, headline. Somebody who has a very high traffic, terrific, conservative, pro-life website who has really studied this, he said the average person reads no more than 400 words on the internet, on an internet article. So if you're going to say something, you better get it in the beginning. 400 words. When I started with CFN back in 1995, we would run sometimes 6,000 word articles with no complaints. Now I'm running 3,000 word article and people are saying it's too long. It's too long. It's killing people's ability to read, to stay focused on one thing, and to follow a logical argument. The internet has a lot of good points, but I think it's destroying our ability to read, our ability to reason, and our ability to have any solitude. Okay, we could have a whole talk on that, but anyway. Point number 5 in this development of character, the natural means, is self-discipline by acts of self-denial. Nobody likes to deny themselves, okay? But self-denial helps to develop self-mastery of the intellect over the will. And here's what Father Woodbury says: every child should be taught to do every day, or even more often, some little act that he finds to be hard, because it involves running contrary to his animal inclination. Our animal inclinations want comfort. Our animal inclinations want the easiest way. Our animal inclinations wants to eat when we want to eat, okay? But it's important, he says, that the child be induced to these acts spontaneously without compulsion. And we suggest, as a means of this mortification, is speaking kindly to one another with a child who has a sensitive, in other words, being kind to somebody you don't really like, abstaining from unnecessary eating of sweets, because what you do is you obtain this self-mastery. And also, as we all know, denying ourselves lawful things with the help of God helps us to deny ourselves things that are unlawful. Number 7, and actually these are 2 points put together: good companionship and noble friendships. This is part of the natural means of developing character. There is an old adage, and we all know it: we become like the company we keep. We become like the company we keep. And Father Woodbury says, again, he's profound. He says, the influence of friends is especially great upon us, and above all, the youthful. For by the love of friendship, we penetrate within our friend, making his will our will, and holding them as another self. How many times have we seen good youngsters just turn around because of bad companions? Or our dear daughter meets the guy and becomes a different person because intellectually they penetrate into one another, and one's will becomes the other, and usually the most dominant. Okay, that's why we have to seek good companions. I remember the nuns. I'm just old enough to have those old nuns. Beware of the company you keep. They would tell us, beware of the company you keep. And he says, we penetrate within our friend, making his will our will, holding them for another self. We are drawn upwards by a good and noble friend, and downwards by a base and ignoble one. Okay, we all know that. The cultivation of good companionship and noble friendships are of utmost importance, especially, again, in the adolescent years, when our character can really become fixed. He also talks about number 9, liberal intellectual development. Now here we're not using the term liberal in the form of, left wing or Hillary Clinton or anything like that. We're talking about the liberal arts, philosophy, mathematics, languages, theology, astronomy, physics. By the proper study of these things, the mind is perfected in intellectual habits. And the study of these subjects confers upon the mind greater facility for right judgment and reason. Now, this is something that Dr. Waters would talk about, and there are books on this. He was a great proponent of the system of education in the Middle Ages, which was called the trivium. Now, the trivium it started with grammar, and went on to the dialectic and the rhetoric. So what did young people do? They weren't given, okay, memorize the capital of every state, of every city, or every country in Europe. This is information that the mind does not benefit from having, or just sheer memorization that we get of the presidents of the United States, or to be able to recite all 50 states, okay? No, you didn't get just a pile of facts and spit them out on the test, and then they say you're a brilliant student. No, you were first given grammar so that you can write clearly. You're given the dialectic, which is logic, so that you could think clearly. And then you went on to rhetoric so that you could speak and communicate clearly and persuasively. Persuasively, I mean in a good sense. Okay? And this was really the basis of the young person's education, learning how to write properly, learning how to think clearly, learning how to speak properly and to speak clearly. And the system is that once these young people became so strongly developed, then you start throwing the other subjects at them, and they suck it all up. I was talking to someone about a year ago who said that I'm not going to say the college he was, but he is involved with job placement for young people leaving college. And he said about 5 years ago, the people in the business world would come in and they would want to see our business students. And the people in this area, accounting students or things like that. He says, what we're finding now is most these big corporations, they say, we want you to recommend people from your philosophy department. And the reason is the philosophy department, even if they're into, some sort of, positivism or something, at least they're spending most of their time thinking. And so what they find is, it says, we're getting people out of colleges who have degrees in economics and accounting, and they can't think. And our training programs are so advanced now that if we can just find someone who can think and reason and follow instructions, then we're going to make a good employee out of them. And it's a similar thing here. The young people would be taught how to think. So you get the idea. I don't have to do that. But I would recommend, you want to write this down. You can look it up on the internet. A 1947 lecture by Dorothy L. Sayers, Sayers, Sayers. Anybody know who she is? She was the writer of the Lord Peter Wimsey mysteries, and she was also, even though she was Anglican, she was a Christian apologist. She wrote defenses of the faith, and she did a speech at Oxford called "The Lost Tools of Learning." The Lost Tools of Learning, and it's all about the trivium. The trivium and the quadrivium, and the way that this really has to be brought back, because right now we don't have education. We just have the training of little specialists who don't know anything except their specialty. Okay, so we're coming to the close here. Number 10, cultivation of interests that are morally and intellectually elevated. Because since our will follows our intellect, and we love and pursue those things which are habitually and constantly in our intellect, our will be drawn to the thing about which the intellect habitually thinks. There's an old adage: if you want to know what you love, pay attention to your thoughts. And whatever your thoughts are landing on the most easy and habitual basis, then you've discovered what you love. Sometimes it can be frightening, but that is the way it is. So, part of the character formation is the development of interest in elevated things such as the welfare of civilization, architect, music, sculpture, science, and it points to the mind and the will to higher things rather than things that are base and degraded. Okay, number 11, the practice of moral virtues. And he says, since our end is God-possessed, that is our supernatural happiness with God, we are only good if we tend towards the supernatural end of man. And has already been noted, this cannot be done except without Christianity. And again, I love him. He is not the least bit ecumenical. Woodbury says, and I speak of true Christianity, Catholicism, not pseudo-Christianity, not counterfeits. That's what he's calling Protestantism, counterfeits. For if we attach ourselves to any one of these counterfeit systems, we cannot be good men. At most, he says, we can be good sailors, good plumbers, good farmers, good dentists, but not good men. Now, the means of the formation of character in the supernatural order, I'm just going to list them because you all know. The sacraments and the holy sacrifice of the Mass, the true Mass especially, prayer, companionship with Christ, and friendship with Christ. Bishop Fulton J. Sheen made a holy hour every day of his life from the time he was a deacon until the day he died. And it's, as I said, you become like the company you keep. Most people can't do that, but many of us might be able to do a holy hour at least once a week and then do it with our children, teach our children. Companionship and friendship with Christ, devotion to the Mother of God, meditation on supernatural truths, trying to cultivate supernatural interests, which is difficult with youngsters because there's so many distractions, and the practice of supernatural virtues. So in our education endeavors, we don't want to produce creatures of the new paganism. We don't want to produce infidels. We don't want to produce a small part of a man pretending to be the whole, or just a good computer technician or a good musician, but a good man. But a good man. And I forgot the definition, but it just came to me. The making of the new man up to the point of virtue. Now, Father Woodbury closes with a word of encouragement to educators, and this is to anyone who's teaching, or especially to homeschoolers. Their responsibility as teacher is tremendous. First of all, the warning. He reminds our Lord's warning from Scripture in Matthew 18, "He that shall scandalize one of these little ones who believe in me, it were better that a millstone be hanged about his neck, and they should be drowned in the depths of the sea." But of course, he also recalls to us the glorious promise from the same divine author who says in chapter 12 of Daniel, "They that shall instruct others unto justice shall shine like stars unto eternity." Parents need to remember that this is the reward of those who do their best to do their job well. Now, I'm closing here. I said I was only going to recommend one homeschool curriculum, and it's really one homeschool course. You know, it's been said that, it takes a young girl a long time to find the right man. And the old saying is, before you find your prince, you have to kiss a lot of frogs. And my wife and I homeschool right now. My children are, Benedict is 13, Philomena 16. Elizabeth now is in UB. She's in college, going into her sophomore year. But we had to kiss a lot of frogs as far as homeschool courses and curriculum. There are some places that all they do is they just reproduce, say, a 1930s textbook. I don't think that's the best method. There are other methods where they're actually very carefully and well designed for homeschool use, because it's a lot of work on the parent. It's a lot of work on the parent. I would recommend one series for one topic, and that is for English, for writing, for grammar, for everything. It is a classical, terrific course. It's called the Institute for Excellence in Writing. The Institute for Excellence in Writing. It was founded by a man named Andrew Pudwa, P-U-D-E-W-A. It is superb. And you get your own teacher. My daughter Elizabeth went through the writing courses. My daughter Philomena went through the writing courses. My daughter Elizabeth turned into a grammar Nazi as a result. She remembered everything. Dad, that's a dangling participle. You shouldn't, It's a riot. It's a riot. But these courses are superb. You do actually get a teacher. And I mean, when I was seeing their curriculum, I thought, gosh, I would probably benefit by going through this again. So the website is IEW.com, and it is superb for writing. Anything else you could talk to me about afterwards. So that's all I have to say with this. Everyone's tired. I'm going to open the floor for questions for 5 minutes. Yes?
I can't leave here without your horse story.
What's that? Oh, my horse story. Right. My horse story. I got a phone call from a dear at Catholic Family News. Now, I'm hardly at the CFN office, actually. I work at home. I get the phone call from a dear elderly woman. Mr. Vennari, do animals go to heaven? And I said, I couldn't resist. Why do you ask? She said, well, I have a horse. And this is a good horse, and I love this horse. And it's in good health. But I'm figuring that I should probably put it to sleep now, before it starts to suffer, and then the horse will just go to straight being happy in heaven. So, do animals go to heaven? Now, I don't know what was with me that day. But usually I'm very gentle in my responses. But I hear this woman say, do animals go to heaven? And I just said, no. Right? There was this shriek on the other end of the line. Now, of course, when a person is in that emotional state, you don't start explaining the type of things like, well, don't you know you have the vegetative principles and the sensate? You're not going to go through that with them. You just use the argument from authority. I'm saying, this is something St. Thomas Aquinas taught. Well, Aquinas didn't know everything. So I gave her the clinching argument. I said, St. Francis of Assisi would have told you this. Oh. So I guess I shouldn't put it down, should I? I said, no. No, don't put it down. So I saved the horse's life. Thanks to St. Thomas Aquinas and to St. Francis. Yeah. So, well, I guess we'll take one more question because I think everybody is tired.
To please publish in Catholic Family News about the thing that John Dewey was attached to.
Oh, yeah, okay, the Humanist Manifesto and all that. Oh, yeah, the Humanist Manifesto is, I mean, you go through that, it's basically that man is the product of a blind evolution, that there is no moral law, that the individual has a right to do whatever he wants to do because he wants to do it. There should be no, moral taboos on sexual license and things like that. And we're living the Humanist Manifesto right now. You don't have to go peeking through Masonic documents and everything. It's out. It's a public document. Humanist Manifesto 1, 1933, Humanist Manifesto 1974. Look them up. It's the air we breathe. So thank you for being with us.